Well, hey there. It is Monday the 15th, and it's about 1:30 in the afternoon, West Coast time, and just kind of plugging back in after our camping and hiking trip over to Central Oregon and needed a mental break just to kind of unplug. And when I go out on my adventures, I am generally out of cell phone service, and I do that with a little apprehension because I have friends and family that are up there in years, and it leaves me feeling a little nervous that something happens while I'm out reconnecting with nature. And but I also have a very clear understanding that you do need to take mental breaks, and we only have this one life to live, and that it's good for us to go out and do it. And when I get done with a trip like that, I get a little nervous when I turn my phone back on, and when we start driving out and cell coverage comes up, and inevitably all of the text messages and the phone calls, messages, and all of this kind of stuff starts pouring in. And over the years, I have come to not let myself get inundated too quickly, because then it kind of fucks me up a little bit coming back into reality. If I just let it all dump on me and I just take it in all at once, then it kind of kills what the point of the trip was even about. And so I'll go through, just to make sure everybody's safe, everybody's sound. I'll go through and, make a couple of phone calls, make sure I've gone through, the phone calls and the text messages. And I leave the social media and the news and that kind of crap to the next day, because I want at least one more really good night's sleep before the rest of reality comes to greet me, if you want to call it that. And this weekend was a little harder as far as like friends and family, all of that's fine. But this weekend, coming back into the news and the social media aspect of it, I got hit with the first icky news story. And you just kind of feel this, here it is again, this reality that we live in. And then the second headline I read, I could feel myself not wanting to engage. And I think our American experience over here, we can get numb to it. But I think that we go through periods, we go through periods in our day when our brain kind of quiets down and then it perks back up. Usually 2:00 in the afternoon, we're all kind of sluggish, this sort of thing. And that's our brain kind of taking a break. And I think because of the lived experience collectively that we in America in particular, we are not a war-ravaged country, although now that we have militant activity in our streets on a daily basis, the vibe is different. It's not the America that you don't feel the freedom of America. I'll say that. And I think it's easy for us to let our brain take those breaks and do extended breaks. And when we do that, when we numb ourselves, when we look at a newsline story and we look for the bullet points, and, in some instances we jump on, if we're listening to left media, right media, which side that we want to jump on. And before we really have any facts, any understanding, any comprehension, we've already taken sides, we're already name calling, we're already pointing fingers. And those people that are quick to do that kind of stuff, they haven't taken the time to actually put themselves in that lived experience of those people that went through that event. And that lived experience of those horrific events, and in some instances, the last lived experience that they'll have in their lifetime. And then the other thing that we're definitely not apt to do is to put ourselves in the shoes of the perpetrators, because they also had and are having, in some instances, if they made it through it, are having a lived experience. And when we consider what brought those people to those places, on both sides of that coin that happened in that event, when we don't pause to really consider that, when we don't pause to consider both sides of that coin, and just the human aspect of it, that's when a society is prone to continue having those same situations play out over and over again. And so I go through and I'm thinking about, the shooting over at Brown University. How many times has that played out now? The terror attack in Australia, on the Bondi Beach. And there's two sides to that story, and you might be partial to one side or the other, but you could flip the scenario, and one side could do the same thing to the other side. And isn't that what has happened in a lot of respect? And sometimes this team's up and this team's down, if you want to describe it that way. Like this left versus right. This is this team and this is that team. But I'll tell you, society as a whole is losing. We're losing because this is a no-win game. Rob and Michelle Reiner being killed by their son. And I think about the situation that brought all of three of those people together, and the struggles that those parents went through with their son, with all of the resources that they had at their disposal, that they still ended up in the situation that they did. And I think of those violent crimes that are perpetrated on other people, and what brings that person to that point: the mental instability, the addictions, the inability to regulate their emotions, their for the myriad of issues, and the lack of mental support that our society offers. And if those people, with all of the assets that they have, all of the resources that they have, were not able to help their son, their loved one, it lets you know how hard that is for anybody else. That definitely doesn't, that the average American that's dealing with those situations where we hear about the father unaliving his family, didn't get the mental help that he needed. The shooting over at Brown University, some point along the way, that person was not supported or given the resources needed for them to have a better outcome. And we think about the terror attack over in Bondi Beach and how you can just flip the scenario so easily in that situation. And for those of you that don't understand or connect or understand how one side treats another, when you hurt another family member, the remaining family members, some of them may not process that well. And you, instead of being cruel and unkind to one person or a handful of people or a group of people, you exponentially harm everybody around them. Think of when somebody unalives themselves and how many people that touches. You turn that into somebody that offs somebody else, how many people that angers. And now you have some of those people that maybe already needed help in their lives, but that was the catalyst that brings them to their next move. And so then you get the repetition in society. And the problem with this is when we see these things that like ICE is doing, when you, instead of helping somebody, you go purposefully out of your way to damage them and their families, that you're not going to acquire, that you're not going to earn hatred and animosity. Hate never fixes hate. You know, we all have heard the saying, you know, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And it's one of the truer statements. And this isn't like cheering on a football team or a basketball team or any of these other sports, the gladiators, any of that crap. When it gets down to it, when people aren't helped, when people aren't given the resources or access, this kind of stuff is perpetrated. Nobody wins this game. Eventually, we're all touched by this. We're not going in a good direction. So there's Monday. Getting back into the swing of things, I guess. I can't wait for Friday because I'm going camping again. And I am going to turn off my fucking phone.